So picture this. It's 2019 and the President of the United States casually floats the idea of buying Greenland, like he's browsing Facebook Marketplace for used furniture. Denmark, who technically owns Greenland, responds with the diplomatic equivalent of, "Sir, this is a Wendy's." The internet has a field day, we all laugh, we move on. Except fast forward to 2026, and suddenly everyone's talking about Greenland again. Trump's back, and he's still going on about it. But here's the thing that nobody wants to admit. As absolutely unhinged as the delivery was, he kinda stumbled onto something real. Greenland is becoming one of the most important pieces of real estate on the entire planet. And if you think this is just about one guy's real estate obsession, oh buddy, strap in. Because this story involves melting ice caps revealing treasure troves of resources, a three-way geopolitical game of risk between superpowers, indigenous peoples caught in the middle, and enough rare earth minerals to make Elon Musk weep tears of pure joy. This is the story of how a giant frozen island that most people couldn't find on a map is about to become the center of a 21st century scramble that makes the old colonial days look like a friendly game of Monopoly. Welcome to the wild, weird, and weirdly important world of Greenland geopolitics. Let's start with the basics, because I know half of you just realized Greenland and Iceland aren't the same place. Don't worry, we've all been there. Greenland is the world's largest island that isn't a continent. Sorry, Australia, you've been promoted. It's about 836,000 square miles of mostly ice, which makes it roughly 3 times the size of Texas, or if you prefer metric, absolutely massive. It sits between the North Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, wedged between Canada and Iceland, looking on a map like Earth's giant frozen shoulder pad. Now, here's where it gets spicy. Greenland has a population of only 56,000 people. To put that in perspective, that's less than the capacity of most major sports stadiums. You could fit the entire population of Greenland into a single Taylor Swift concert with room to spare. Most of these people are Greenlandic Inuit, indigenous to the island, living in coastal towns because the interior is basically one giant ice cube that laughs at the concept of human habitation. Politically, Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. Think of it like Denmark is the parent and Greenland is the adult child who moved out but still shows up for Sunday dinner and whose phone bill Denmark still pays. Greenland handles its own domestic affairs, but Denmark manages defense and foreign policy. It's complicated, like most family relationships. For most of history, nobody cared about Greenland except for Denmark, some Vikings who had a truly terrible time there, and climate scientists nervously watching ice sheets. It was cold, remote, expensive to maintain, and mostly just there. But then, 3 things happened that changed everything. Climate change started melting the ice, revealing what's underneath. Global superpowers realized the Arctic is becoming a major shipping route, and everyone simultaneously remembered that whole rare earth minerals thing that every modern gadget needs. Suddenly, Greenland went from that big white blob on the map to strategic geopolitical asset that everyone wants a piece of. Let's talk geography, because location is everything, whether you're buying a house or planning global domination. Greenland sits at essentially the choke point between North America and Europe. If you're Russia and want to send submarines into the Atlantic, you're probably going past Greenland. If you're trying to defend North America from missiles coming over the Arctic, Greenland is your early warning system. If you're planning shipping routes of the future as Arctic ice melts, congrats, you're going past Greenland. This is why the US built Thule Air Base, now called Pituffik Space Base because someone in the Pentagon learned about branding back in 1951. It's America's northernmost military base, hosts crucial early warning systems for ballistic missiles, and supports space surveillance. Basically, it's where America watches the sky for anything that might ruin everyone's day. The base is so strategically important that during the Cold War, it was considered essential to detecting Soviet missile launches. But the location gets even more valuable when you consider climate change. The Arctic is warming at literally twice the rate of the rest of the planet. This is catastrophic for polar bears and ice-dependent ecosystems, but it's also opening up new sea routes that were previously frozen solid.
The northern sea route along Russia's coast could cut shipping time between Asia and Europe by weeks compared to the Suez Canal route. And guess what sits right along these new shipping lanes? Our friend Greenland. This is the part where every major power starts getting very interested in Arctic governance and regional cooperation, which is diplomatic speak for, "I want a piece of that." Russia has been building up its Arctic military presence like it's preparing for a polar call of duty. China declared itself a near-Arctic state, which is like me declaring myself a near-millionaire because I once visited Beverly Hills, and has been investing heavily in Arctic research and infrastructure. And the United States is suddenly remembering it actually has Arctic territory and maybe should pay attention to it. Greenland isn't just a place anymore. It's a strategic position in a game where the board is literally shifting under everyone's feet. Okay, pop quiz. What do smartphones, electric car batteries, wind turbines, and advanced military equipment all have in common? If you said rare earth elements, congratulations, you've been paying attention to geopolitics. If you said they're all things I can't afford, also valid. Greenland is sitting on potentially massive deposits of rare earth elements. We're talking neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and other elements that sound like rejected Pokemon names but are actually crucial for modern technology. These minerals are essential from your iPhone's vibration motor to the magnets in electric vehicles to precision-guided missiles. Here's the problem. China currently controls about 70% of global rare earth mining and refining. This is the geopolitical equivalent of one player in Monopoly owning all 4 railroads and most of the properties. Everyone else is nervous because if China decides to cut off supply, which it's threatened to do during trade disputes, the entire tech industry has a very bad day. Enter Greenland, potentially holding some of the largest undeveloped rare earth deposits on Earth. There's a specific site called Kvanefjeld that alone could supply a significant chunk of global demand. Suddenly, every major country that doesn't want to depend on China for their iPhone parts is very interested in Greenland's mining permits. But wait, there's more. Greenland also has massive deposits of zinc, lead, and gold, oil and gas reserves offshore, though extracting them in Arctic conditions costs roughly 1 kidney and your firstborn. Uranium, which is great if you're into nuclear power or, other nuclear things. Potential for rare gemstones because apparently Greenland is just showing off at this point. The estimated value of Greenland's mineral resources numbers range from tens of billions to over $1 trillion, depending on who's doing the math and how optimistic they're feeling. There's just one tiny problem. Extracting these resources in one of the harshest environments on Earth with limited infrastructure, extreme weather, and significant environmental concerns is extraordinarily expensive and complicated. You can't just show up with a pickaxe and a dream. Which brings us to everyone's favorite part of resource extraction, controversy.
All right, let's meet our cast of characters in this Arctic drama. Denmark, the reluctant parent. Denmark is in the awkward position of technically owning Greenland, but also kind of wanting Greenland to be more independent, but also not wanting to lose influence, but also this whole thing is expensive. It's like having a kid who wants their own apartment, but you're still paying their rent. Denmark provides Greenland with an annual subsidy of about $600 million, which covers roughly half of Greenland's government budget. This is both incredibly generous and also a source of tension because financial dependence doesn't exactly scream full autonomy. Copenhagen wants to maintain good relations, support Greenlandic self-determination, but also really doesn't want Greenland falling into someone else's sphere of influence, especially when that someone else is the United States, the eager buyer. America's interest in Greenland isn't new. The U.S. actually tried to buy it in 1946 for $100 million in gold. Denmark said no. Then Trump tried again in 2019, got publicly rejected, canceled a state visit in what can only be described as a diplomatic tantrum, and everyone laughed. But American strategic thinkers never stopped caring. The Pentagon sees Greenland as crucial for North American defense, monitoring the Arctic and counterbalancing Russian and Chinese influence. The Trump administration's renewed interest in 2025 isn't just random. It reflects genuine strategic concerns, just delivered with all the subtlety of a hammer. The U.S. already has military presence through Pituffik Space Base and has been upgrading Arctic capabilities. The question is whether America wants more influence through investment and partnership, or if someone's actually still entertaining the purchase idea, which would be historically hilarious and diplomatically catastrophic. China, the near-Arctic state, China's Arctic ambitions are wrapped in the language of scientific research and economic cooperation, which is like a wolf showing up to the henhouse with a clipboard claiming to be conducting a survey. Beijing published an Arctic policy white paper declaring itself a near-Arctic state with legitimate interests in the region. This claim is geographically creative. China is about near Arctic as I am near Olympic athlete because I occasionally jog, but reflects serious strategic thinking. Beijing has been investing in Greenland mining projects, proposing to build airports, financing research stations, and generally trying to establish economic ties that could translate to political influence. The playbook is familiar: invest in infrastructure, develop economic dependencies, gain strategic leverage. Denmark and the U.S. have successfully blocked several Chinese investments in Greenland, concerned about strategic assets falling into Beijing's hands. This has frustrated both China and some Greenlanders who see Chinese money as crucial for development. Russia, the Arctic neighbor, Russia has the longest Arctic coastline and has been militarizing the Arctic like it's going out of style. New bases, upgraded facilities, fancy new icebreakers. Moscow is making very clear that it considers the Arctic its backyard. While Russia's been more focused on its own Arctic territories, it's watching Greenland closely. Any NATO or U.S. presence there affects Russian strategic calculations. Plus, Russia's been cozying up to China on Arctic issues, which gives the West collective anxiety. And finally, Greenland itself. Here's what often gets lost in great power discussions. Greenlanders actually have opinions about their own future. Wild concept, I know. There's growing support for full independence from Denmark, particularly among younger Greenlanders. But independence comes with a massive challenge. How do you fund a modern government when your economy is tiny, your population is small, and you're dependent on Danish subsidies? Resource development could provide that economic independence, but it also raises huge questions about environmental protection, cultural preservation, and whether Greenland wants to become a mining colony for global powers. Greenlandic leaders are walking a tightrope, trying to maintain good relations with Denmark, accepting investment without becoming dependent on any single foreign power, protecting the environment and traditional ways of life, and building towards potential independence. It's like playing 4D chess while standing on melting ice. Let's address the literally heated elephant in the room. Climate change isn't just background context here, it's the main character. Greenland's ice sheet is melting at an accelerating rate. We're talking about roughly 280 billion tons of ice loss per year. That's not a typo, billion with a B. This contributes to global sea level rise, which threatens coastal cities worldwide. So Greenland's ice sheet is basically everyone's problem. But here's where it gets weirdly complicated. While this melting is catastrophic environmentally, it's also what's making Greenland's resources accessible and opening new shipping routes. It's like your house flooding but discovering there's gold under the floorboards. Technically beneficial in one narrow sense, but you'd really rather your house not be flooding. This creates a deeply uncomfortable situation where some actors might see climate change not as a crisis to prevent, but as an opportunity to exploit. Nobody says this out loud at climate conferences, but the incentive structure is absolutely there. For Greenlanders themselves, climate change is already reshaping traditional hunting and fishing, threatening communities with coastal erosion, and fundamentally altering the environment their culture is built around. The idea that the rest of the world sees their melting ice sheet as primarily a resource opportunity rather than an existential threat is understandably pretty galling. So where does this all go?
Scenario 1, Greenland gradually becomes more independent from Denmark, maintains strategic partnership with NATO and the US, carefully develops resources with strong environmental protections, and becomes a small but wealthy Arctic nation. This is the optimistic timeline. Scenario 2, great power competition intensifies, Greenland becomes a contested zone of influence, environmental concerns get sidelined in a rush to extract resources, and we get a modern Arctic Scramble with all the ugliness that implies. Scenario 3, climate change accelerates beyond current predictions, the ice sheet collapse becomes irreversible, global sea level rise displaces hundreds of millions of people, and arguing about Greenland's resources becomes moot because we're all too busy dealing with civilizational crisis. Most likely, some messy combination of all three. What's clear is that Greenland is no longer a sleepy backwater that nobody thinks about. It's becoming a focal point of 21st century geopolitics, where climate change, resource competition, military strategy, indigenous rights, and great power rivalry all intersect. The conclusion: why you should actually care. Look, I get it. Greenland seems remote, literally and figuratively. Why should anyone care about geopolitical maneuvering over an island most people can't locate on a map? Because what happens in Greenland doesn't stay in Greenland. The rare earth elements potentially mined there will end up in your devices. The military installations there affect global nuclear deterrence, which affects whether we all get vaporized. The ice melting there is raising sea levels everywhere. The precedents set there about indigenous sovereignty, resource exploitation, and environmental protection will ripple outward. And maybe most importantly, Greenland is a microcosm of every major challenge facing humanity right now. Climate change creating both crisis and opportunity, indigenous people caught between tradition and development, small nations navigating between great powers, the tension between economic growth and environmental protection, the question of who benefits from global changes and who bears the costs. Greenland is where the future is being written in ice and stone and geopolitical chess moves. So the next time someone mentions Greenland, maybe don't just think about that time Trump wanted to buy it like a Mar-a-Lago expansion. Think about what it represents, a giant frozen island sitting at the intersection of everything that will define this century, slowly melting, revealing both treasure and trouble, while the whole world watches and waits to see who gets there first. And if you learned something today, maybe drop a like and subscribe, because apparently global geopolitics is now YouTube content. And honestly, that feels very on brand for 2025. Thanks for watching, and remember, everything's connected, even the frozen parts.